Hi, I'm Mitch, and welcome to the Restoration Road, where my guest today to help teach on connections, how we reach out to a lost and hurting world with the gospel of Jesus Christ, are my good friends, Kelly Bird. Thank you, Kelly, for being here today.
Thank you, Mitch. Always good to be with you.
Curtis Smith from 21 Alive.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you, Curtis. You look like you're ready to preach. You've been preaching a lot lately.
I have been. It's been great.
And senior and founding pastor of Grace Christian Church, one of the fastest growing churches in America, Chris Mosley. Thank you for being here, Chris.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Also a great batting instructor and softball coach. Multiple championship winner. Today I want to talk about what it means to be salt. And it's an acronym, as you can imagine, but to actually be seasoned when we talk to people, to make them thirsty for God. I think it's Colossians 4, 5, and 6. Could you read Colossians chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, Chris, please?
Yep.
Where Paul uses this actual analogy. Salt was one of the most valuable commodities. There were wars fought over salt. Salt was used in baking. Salt was used for preserving. Really, really interesting how valuable salt was and is to our world today.
So Colossians chapter 4, verse 4.
You can read verse 4 maybe first, and then definitely verses 5 and 6.
Okay, we'll start at 5.
Well, does 4 talk about praying?
Yes, it does.
I think that would be good.
Okay. Pray that I may proclaim it clearly as I should. Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone.
Yeah, people are going to start asking you questions when you lead with grace, you talk about, and salt's going to make them thirsty for God. Kelly, remember what Leonard Sweet said about a story? It's epic.
I do, yeah. Yeah, he said it was, good stories are E, experiential. They are P, participatory, image-based I, and they, I think he said they're connective. I think we changed it to they foster community. I don't think he minded, but...
A story just brings everything to life. We see ourselves in the story.
Yeah.
So this is a parable that Jesus told. Almost everybody could say the title of the parable. But Curtis, you're going to read it to us, and we're going to unpack it a little bit.
And a lawyer stood up and put him to the test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And he said to him, "What is written in the law? How does it read to you?" And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live." But wishing to justify himself, he said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied and said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, and they stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. And by chance, a priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise, a Levite also, when he came to that place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan who was on a journey came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion, and came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he put him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay you.' Which of these do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hands?" And he said, "The one who showed mercy toward him." And then Jesus said to him, "Go and do the same."
Powerful ending. Go and do the same. Jesus picked a Samaritan to be the good guy. Samaria had rejected him. Jews didn't like Samaritans very well, did they, Chris?
Not at all.
They called them half-breeds from captivity of intermarriage. Samaritans had their own worship on Mount Gerizim. It was real spirited, I guess, full of emotion. Jews were about the truth. But it's interesting. I guess there's this huge, it says down from Jerusalem to Jericho, right? It's this huge fall. And have you been there?
I have.
You've been to Jerusalem. Have you been to Jericho?
And Jericho, yes.
And there's a big change in sea level, right? Isn't Jericho like maybe the lowest point on earth or something?
Yeah, and it's a ways up there. Like Jerusalem and Bethlehem and a lot of the places we know from the Bible are very close, 5-6 miles apart. But Jericho is up there a bit,
And it's
or down there a bit.
I guess it would have been a winding road,
Yeah, I'm sure.
and there were robbers that would hide behind corners and stuff. The biggest thing I found when I studied this parable is that the Levite and the priest were coming back from leading worship in Jerusalem. They would take turns on when they would go to Jerusalem and lead worship. And so it'd be like Kelly walking out of a sermon, Chris walking out of a sermon, and Chris goes down to Main Street on Kendallville, and there's this guy laying there. And Chris makes sure he's far enough away that he follows the law where he hasn't touched anything unclean. His shadow hasn't touched anything unclean, so he knows he's farther away. And who went first? The priest? Is that right?
Yes.
And then the Levite says, well, if the priest couldn't get that close to him, I got to make sure I'm farther away than that. And he does the same thing. But Jesus said, I don't know who it would be for us today.
Somebody despised.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably a Celtic fan.
The Celtic fan would be the Samaritan who does the good deed.
I'm sorry.
Helps the poor, desolate Laker fan who has obviously brought this upon himself.
Oh, man.
Who's the Steeler fan?
Yeah, but he was out
In
there.
the parable. Who's
No,
the
you're
Steeler
right. You were
The
going to
innkeeper.
right.
Hands down.
He made money on the deal.
He healed it. He was the one that actually did the work and made it right.
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh, that's awesome. But that's what we do. We want to go get filled up at church or filled up in our Bible study, but we don't want to release that in things that are uncomfortable, in serving others when it's uncomfortable. And it's interesting that the lawyer wants to justify himself, the teacher of the law, he wants to define neighbor as small as possible so he can prove that he kept the law. And then at the end, Jesus said, which one did it? And he won't even say the Samaritan, the one that had pity on him or showed mercy. And Jesus says, go and do likewise. Chris, how has your life looked like maybe the Levite or the priest? And then maybe show us a time when it was a little bit more like the Good Samaritan.
I think everybody goes through a phase. I mean, we don't want to admit it, but I think we all go through a legalistic phase in our ministries. I think we do. When you first get saved, you want to keep the rules because you don't know a lot. So what you do know, you want to keep so that everybody thinks you are what you say you are.
I remember when I got baptized in 4th grade, I wasn't going to cuss on the playground anymore.
Yeah.
Mom, I really hardly ever did. They were more like Christian cuss words.
Yeah, Christian cuss words. But I do think there's a point in there where you become judgmental, and when you think that when the Bible talks about separating yourself, it means putting yourself above other people. I think all of us at one time or another feel that way. I know throughout the church, in recent history, they're always boycotting something. You know what I mean? Which I now don't agree with at all. But I never understand. Remember when they boycotted Disney? Boy, that just tore the mouse down, didn't it? But
one of the first things I asked him when I was going to come teach the Bible with him at Blackhawk, I said, "Hey, do you ever tell people they can't watch?" And he stopped me and says, "I don't tell people they can't watch nothing."
That's right.
Because I don't go down that road.
Right, but
No boycotting.
I think we all go through that phase, and until the Spirit has time to teach you that that's wrong, that we're judgmental, and I think I don't know. At least I went through that phase early on, but the Spirit really convicted me because I remember what I came from. I know who I was, and there was many times that was me, that was laying there, drunk and disorderly, left along the side, and people were judging me, and God just revealed to me, listen, I don't want you to fill your church with the people who think they're good. It's the people that everybody is walking past that I want to fill these pews. That's your audience. Your audience is not the people who think they have it figured out. Your audience is the people who needs to know me. That's your audience.
Wow.
And I got so convicted, I couldn't take part in any of that anymore. And so now I still get emails and stuff from people, let's boycott this company because they do this, and let's boycott this, this parade. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not boycotting anybody.
Yeah.
If they see me and at one of their rallies, it's going to be to show them love, because I just don't. Yeah. I don't understand that mindset. But I don't know if that answers the question. But there's a progression, I think, when you want to be obedient to the people that led you to Christ, and then all of a sudden you realize you're following people, not Christ.
And when you actually follow Christ, what's ironic about it is that Jesus didn't just teach a parable about this. This is how he lived. He went to the tax collectors. He came to the aid of the prostitute. He didn't shy away from anyone for any reason. So if we actually do follow Christ, we end up doing that because that is the behavior he's modeled for us. So we have this image sometimes in our head of we're better than some people. Oh, look at those people over there. It's the whole log and speck thing again. But that's not how Jesus lived. That's not how he taught us. It's not what he showed us.
I actually had people tell me one time, I heard that there are people that are out drinking and partying on Saturday night in your church on Sunday morning. And I said, well, praise God, I hope everybody there was. I hope the whole party comes. You know what I mean? Well, that guy, and you know what he's done in the community? You know how many times he's been in jail? I'm like, well, then he's in the right spot. That's who I want. I want those people. I mean, but that's the mindset. People are like, I heard this kind of person goes to your church. And I said,
I remember 15 years ago, John Barse, Doug Crane, Matt Roars, Tony Opliger coming to us about needing to intensify and become more intentional with our serving of the needy in the community and them connecting that to evangelism. And I thought it was like social gospel stuff. I was like, nah. My seminary education had trained me, you know, that was all the beginning of liberal theology. And I can't tell you how long I struggled with, and at the end of the day, how much I missed early on, until God finally, you know, brought me and, you know, our church eventually around to a place where it became a high value and a regular occurrence that, you know, we were making that connection between serving the physical needs of people and the gospel eternal. I'm sad when I think back on what I missed, thankful for the lesson I learned.
Well, what do you think the S in SALT is?
Serve.
Serving initiates a relationship. Can you get Mark 10:45? I think scholars think this is the theme verse of Mark. And it's what the Samaritan did for the guy beaten along the road. Do you have it already?
10:35?
45.
45, yes. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many.
So it's just kind of ironic, Chris, that a Christian, somebody says, I fully surrender my life to Christ, wouldn't want to serve when he says that about himself.
I know.
Yeah.
No, it's awesome. Strange.
You guys have all had strong passions to serve. Chris, talk about how you felt the prompting to serve in the Philippines.
It was weird. I mean, to be honest with you, we train pastors in India, and that's gone really well. And I think we have 4 or 5 churches in India right now. And so, you become complacent when something's working. You know what I mean? And someone brought a pamphlet in and laid it on my desk about this orphanage in the Philippines who had no support. And I was thinking to myself, I mean, why are you bringing that to us? You know, we don't have a lot of money and resources, but I'll look at it. I wasn't saying no. I just said I'll look at it. And a week or so later, the receptionist comes in. She said, "Have you read that yet?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'll read it." And I read it, and my heart just poured out to this orphanage because there was a church and an orphanage that was evangelizing to Muslims in their community, and they had nothing. I mean, sometimes they'd eat rice and water for a month. I mean, it was desperate. And so I said, "Okay, we'll do it." And we got a crew, and we flew over. And the whole time I'm getting ready to get on the plane, I'm going, "Why am I doing this? I'm a pastor. I'm not a missionary. Why am I doing this? I'm a pastor. I'm not a missionary." You know what I mean? I was nervous. From the moment we landed, and those people embraced us, and we saw the joy they had for Christ with nothing, and the passion that they served people with in the community with nothing. I just realized that, this has to keep going. And so when we started sending food over, and we put internet capabilities in the school that they have there, and we started sending, and we're still working trying to get them. They live in houses, that the roofs are falling in. And I said, "Well, do you want us to try to get money to rebuild the house?" No, send money so we can keep the kids and the students okay. They said, "We're not from the West. We don't need much, but we want them to be educated in Christ and keep evangelizing." Wow. And it was just unreal. And through serving them, I think they grew our faith. We realized how spoiled we are. And how, you look at them and their joy is Christ. And, and I thought, wow, yeah, we're giving them resources, but we're certainly not establishing their ministry. Their ministry may have been more powerful than ours because they were serving because that's what, their joy was.
That's powerful.
It was amazing.
You've served in Africa. You've served in India. Why don't you just talk a little about that call to serve for As Our Own?
Well, yeah, I think it started for me, I'd say for us, for a lot of us at Blackhawk in those days. We sat at a GLS and listened to Bill interview Bono. And Bono and U2 had just, at that point, this was years ago, they had made a huge shift and began to invest in AIDS medication, AIDS recovery, and Bono and his relationship with Bill was kind of challenging the church of America, just asking if maybe it might have more to give and offer. And I just felt very convicted. I felt personally sort of ashamed at the lack of effort in my own heart and our effort as a ministry. So I remember getting with Brent and just saying, hey, you got to find an orphanage. Just find a way for us to try and make a small difference. And that's when we first got connected in Nairobi at the orphanage there. That was an entire orphanage and 5 satellite orphanages, and 80% of what they did was help little babies die with dignity. 300 babies thrown away, literally thrown out in the bush, in the trash, in the sewer system every day in Kenya due to HIV. So we started going to Nairobi. We took hundreds of people over 5 years. We sent, hundreds of thousands of dollars and just tried to do something to make a difference, beyond ourselves. So Nairobi, the orphanage there was absolutely life-changing. And then it was after Nairobi, we actually ended up meeting and beginning a relationship with As Our Own, Ralph and that incredible team who are working tirelessly to see young little girls removed out of the darkness of the sex trade industry over in India, and the involvement we had with them, the things that we saw, the lives that we were able to see touched, the giving that Blackhawk and those in our community gave toward that. It was mind-boggling what we saw happen and what has continued to happen over the last 3 years. Very grateful.
And Curtis, you were called with Hear Care on your first trip, I think, to Israel, and you've been a couple places since.
Israel, and then we went to Zambia, Africa, and last year Haiti, and then our next one's going to be to Guatemala. And we hopefully will get to India at some point. We're trying to work through that. But Guatemala is our next one. So, yeah, kind of getting all over.
You were able to serve, you actually helped with the hearing aids, did you?
Well, yes. I played a very minimal role. I'm certainly no audiologist, but they allow me to help a little bit. And it's amazing. There's so many needs in remote parts of the world. And what I've learned is that outside of America, a lot of the hearing issues around the world are hereditary. So we're helping a lot of kids. We're not helping, because I think here, when you hear about, helping with hearing issues, you probably think of the elderly or senior citizens. But in each stop, we've been helping children predominantly. Wow. And when you can open up hearing for a child, you see it on their face, the whole world becomes open to them. They are able to learn and communicate and see things differently. And so to do that and to be with Hear Care as they've done that in the name of Jesus has been mind-boggling, spectacular.
That's powerful. Great illustrations on serving. The A in SALT is asking questions. I'll phrase it this way. Don't questions generate answers, and statements produce resistance. I think the power of a question runs deeply. I've shared it before. I think anybody that I prayed with to surrender their lives to Christ at some point was asked, and prior to that, they were asked a lot of other questions. How is asking questions rather than telling statements change the way that you connect with people who are outside looking in on faith?
Well, when you ask somebody, you're getting them to reveal something of themselves to you. When you tell them something, you're pushing something of you onto them. And the former is easier. When they can actually answer from within themselves, you'll get a more honest answer, and they'll be introspective. They'll think more about themselves when you ask them a question rather than tell them something. And I've asked, when I was in the Philippines one time, I found out that, I've been there 4 times, but the first time I went there, I found out that they like softball. And one of the guys there let it slip that I batting coach, and they said, oh, would you work with a couple kids? And I walked out there, and there was a line. It's like 100 degrees and 98, and I'm the whitest guy in the continent at that time, And so there was this line of kids I was working with, and everywhere we went to speak, these Islamic girls followed us. And I thought, why they, it couldn't be an accident that they were everywhere we were speaking. So one of the last times I was with the kids, I asked them, I said, have you ever trusted Christ, or is that interested? Are you interested in trusting Christ? And they said, well, there's a big wall. They had an interpreter. They said, there's a big wall between us and them because, they don't believe the same way we believe. And I said, yeah, but you're here. So, are you interested in Christ? And the tear just started going down her face, and she said, yeah, I am. And then the other girl, a tear went down her face, and she said, I am too. And I said, listen, there's no wall I won't climb to pray with you. Because if Jesus came to die for us, to give us eternal life, what's a wall for me to climb, to spend some time and pray with you? So we knelt down together, and sobbing, they sat there and cried. And I cried. You know me, I was blubbering so bad they probably didn't hear a word I said. But we knelt down and we prayed together, and that they were at every church service after that. To be able to pray with somebody to receive Christ that's been raised in a culture of hate for believers, it was powerful. It was humbling.
If serving initiates a relationship, asking intrigues a relationship.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example. I bet the first time hearing aid or any kind of a resource like that goes into an ear, the first thing you do is ask a question.
Yeah, usually it starts with some rudimentary sound. Just, can you hear this? And you're snapping or clapping or whatever. And when it happens, you can see, their face lights up. I've seen moms holding babies who can't hear, and the baby all of a sudden jerks their head over, and tears just flow from the mom because they realize my child's life has just changed for the better. And on the question thing, I was thinking, again, it's just about modeling Jesus. He doesn't just give us the parable. And you said it well, they saw themselves in the parables. They saw themselves as part of the story. But even with that, at the end, Jesus says, which one of these was the neighbor? He still asks a question to get them more involved. It's not just enough to give a good story, to see yourself in the story. He asked the question.
Yeah, that's really good. In the top of the series, we outlined questions that you could ask. What's your church or spiritual background? It's unthreatening. We can ask them, hey, please tell me your story. And that kind of warms them up to saying, hey, where's God and all that for you? And then we can ask, in terms of the God thing, would you describe yourself as skeptic, seeker, or surrendered? It just seems like everybody wants to answer those questions. I don't know how else to get it. But asking questions intrigues a relationship. The L in SALT is listening. You can imagine, what good is it to ask if you're not going to listen? I remember a market survey writer who said, now, if you ask this question, do you really want to know the answer to it, or are you going to do what you want to do anyway? And I think that was such insight on the way we are. Listening gives integrity to a relationship. Chris, can you talk about a time when you listened to somebody? Maybe it's in the Philippines as well.
I don't know where to start. There's so many different times. A lot of times coaching, I get a huge opportunity to listen because kids will talk to me about things they won't talk to their parents about.
Right.
And they'll come to practice, and I can tell that their demeanor's different. I can tell that they're not 100%. And sometimes I'll just sit down and say, is everything okay? We'll let them go out and practice. Why don't you tell me what's going on? And I just listen. And they'll just open up their heart. And a lot of times they'll work through their problem just by talking to you and letting it out. You know what I mean? And so I don't look for ways to jump in and and to correct. I just listen to let them pour it out.
And great listening leads to great second questions.
Yes.
And great listening lends itself to a great third question. If you go back to a woman at the well, if you just read that, and we all should every once in a while, it is just a clinic on question one, off she goes. And then you look at his next question, and his third question and his fourth question, I know he was God, but he was listening, is my point. And I think that's just a great example for us. Asking the questions are great, but it's the listening that allows for the next question and the next question to actually, I think, have merit and power.
And Proverbs 18:13 says, he who answers before listening, it's to his folly and shame. It's so foolish, yet we do it in evangelism all the time. SALT, S-A-L-T, the S is serve. It initiates a relationship. Ask, intrigues a relationship. Listen, gives integrity to the relationship. And the T is touch. It's a connection. It's connecting my life story with theirs, where it fits. And that gives intimacy to a relationship. I think that can also include that serving really touched a need. And Jesus presented the gospel usually in a context of meeting a need first. And he met everyone, like Kelly just said, right where they are. I know that you are a natural at this. We role-played one time, but it ended up being a real deal with you and a person on staff at Blackhawk. We role-played that they were on a plane. And Kelly started connecting. He started serving. He asked. He listened. And what was going on with the other staff member was true, and nobody knew that this was true. And so they're talking. I remember this like it was yesterday. They're talking to each other, and in probably 2 minutes, there's almost tears in both of their eyes because they both connected on something on a family level. I think it had to do with your fathers. And when Kelly said those two powerful words to him, me too, I mean, you just saw it all unfold. The power of touching my story where it fits with another. Thank you so much for helping us teach SALT today. I really appreciate it. And our prayer for you is that you would serve, ask, listen, touch. That you would initiate a relationship with meeting a need and serving, just like Jesus taught in the parable of the Good Samaritan. That you would ask questions that intrigue the relationship. Not tricky questions, not questions with an ulterior motive. Just simply ask questions. And then listen. Listen, like my dad used to say, to not just their words, but what they're really telling you, what's in their hearts. And then finally, that will give integrity to the relationship. And then finally, touch, intimacy. Connect your story with theirs, where it fits, and God will use you to make them thirsty for Him.